Alright, so I'm recording this video as a way to demonstrate and show my ROM warping technique for anyone who might be curious and want to implement it. I would like to also begin by saying that I would not recommend implementing this technique until you're at the very least 53 level, because over the course of the run, this ROM warping like this might save maybe 5 to 10 seconds, but unless you're at around 53 level at the very least, there's just better ways to save that time than going like this. So, and given that ROM warping like this isn't just trivial and something you can pick up in a day, I'd say that unless you're, like I said, at around 53, mid 53 level, something along lines of that, I would not recommend you implementing this. Now, with the more traditional ROM warp, what you would do is you would open your menu, hold it into the wall and into the screen transition, and just mash C like that. However, ROM warping like that is not the fastest way to go. The fastest way you can ROM warp in Undertale is in 3 frames. Doing this usually takes, in my experience, anywhere between 10 to 15 frames depending on the player. However, it is possible to go as fast as 3 frames. The way that I achieve these 3-frame ROM warps is by inputting the following. I go CZ on the first frame to open the menu and advance to the item in one frame. Enter on the second frame to get to use, and then Z again on the third frame. The hardest part is pressing Z 1 frame apart, so because you're having to hit Z, release for 1 frame, then hit it the next. Going fast definitely does help. So again, it's CZ, enter, Z. Going fast, it looks something like that. And essentially, to achieve the 3-frame ROM warp, that's what you're wanting to use to menu instead of just doing that. Another key element of how I ROM warp in 3 frames is by not letting go of the direction that I am ROM warping into. And what I mean by that is, so you'll see that when a lot of people ROM warp, what they'll do is they'll actually release all the arrow keys and then they'll input the ROM warp. This can be easier, but it is slower because to frame perfectly ROM warp like that, you are having to frame perfectly release and press C on the next frame, which is just really hard. So instead of doing that, if you watch me ROM warp here, you'll see that I never actually release right there the entire time, which means that the thing that stops me is me opening the menu, like so. And once again, there, the menu opening is what stops me, which is how I can stop frame perfectly. Alright, so that part covers the menuing. However, in my opinion, the most difficult part of Z-enter warps, and the main reason why they are not trivial, is because of how you have to position your hands, or that is your fingers, to do the ROM warps. Because the key to ROM warping like this is that you're having to reach from your arrow keys over here. You're having to somehow simultaneously access your arrow keys and the enter key to do these ROM warps. And if you've never done Z-enter warps before, it can be tricky to get used to. But I'm going to go over the hand positioning that I use. Of course, everyone will have their own way of doing it. This is just the way I do it. Right, so I'm gonna start with the most basic type of ROM warp, ROM warping to the right. So in this case, what I do, it's also the simplest hand positioning. What I do is I more or less keep my hands in the most natural position I can for just moving around as usual. Except what I'll do when it comes time to ROM warp is I'll sort of rotate my wrist up like this so that I can access the enter key. So basically, if you watch me ROM warp, when I'm moving towards the screen transition, you can see my hand almost instinctively move up to reach the enter key. Like so. And that's the ROM warp. And so, to go to the right, all you do is you just reach up with your index finger while your middle and ring finger are on the arrow keys, and this one's probably the easiest one to do. You may also know that when you wrong warp, you need to also be holding into a wall as well as the screen transition in order to wrong warp. And the way that I time to add that input is I time it with my enter press. So for example, when going to the right, what I do is I press up and enter on the same frame, and that helps me time it perfectly. So at full speed, it'll look something like this. Give me a moment. Like so. I would also like to add that whenever I'm wrong warping to the right, in the case that I missed a wrong warp, such as like that, I wouldn't actually recommend trying to Z-enter warp again, because like there I got lucky, but more often than not, what ends up happening when you try to back it up like this is you'll info the punch card. So in this case, I just wrong warp as usual. Right, for wrong warping to the left and upwards, I have a pretty similar technique. Wrong warping to the left and up to the left is slightly trickier than wrong warping to the right, because when you're wrong warping to the right, it's pretty obvious that you can simply keep your ring and middle finger where they are as usual, and then just reach your index finger up. However, you can't exactly do that when you're going to the left because you can't just reach up like that. So some people, what they will do is, I know Link does this, is they'll put middle finger on left and then ring finger on up, and then use their index to reach enter. However, that doesn't feel comfortable to me. So what I do instead is I use my thumb. I put my thumb on left, and I put my ring on up, and that allows me to input like this. And once again, I'm doing the exact same sequence of inputs as with the right. Is going to the right, where I'm doing C, Z, enter, Z, and timing my up press with my enter press, so that all in all it looks like that. So that all in all looks like that. Alright, so that's going to the left. Going upwards, my technique for going upwards is actually pretty similar to that, where I'll use a thumb and ring finger, except instead of adding in the up input, I'll add in the left input, like so. And for wrong warping to the left, I will actually back it up by doing a Z-enter warp, because I will actually back up wrong warps to the left by doing a Z-enter warp, because while buffering with my thumb is difficult, there is no danger of infoing the punch card while going to the left, like so. Right, now for the Z-enter warp that took me the longest to implement, which is going downwards. This one's the most difficult for me, in my opinion. So for this one, as usual, I'm using thumb and ring, except to press left and down. And then what I do is CZ, hold CZ, and then is like all my other wrong warps. So CZ and then enter Z, while inputting the direction into the wall when I'm pressing enter, like so. Hold on, like so. As for how much time Z-enter warp save, that all really depends on how long it takes you to do wrong warps without it. For example, before I implemented Z-enter warp, my wrong warps looked something like that, which were approximately 9 to 10 frames. And so by implementing these and getting them down to 3 frames, I am saving approximately 6 to 7 frames per wrong warp, which does add up. Over the course of core, I do end up saving over a second over someone that doesn't do Z-enter warps. However, like I said at the start, I wouldn't recommend implementing this unless you are already like really good at the game, because implementing these is not trivial. I would also like to add that if you're wanting to implement these wrong warps and want to figure out how many frames you are from being perfectly optimal, or if you are optimal, then what you can do is you can use Willy J's in-game timer mod, set it to a room, and then just walk out as normal. I'm using this room here because I already have a save state for it. So there I was 2.33, and basically what you'll do then is you'll wrong warp into the next room and essentially count how many frames it took. So each frame is 0.03. I got a 2.47 there. Since walking in without a wrong warp is 2.33, just 2.33, that means it took me 4 frames, which means I was 1 frame off. You'll know that your wrong warp was perfect if the difference between going into the room with the wrong warp and without the wrong warp is exactly 0.1, because that is 3 frames. So I'm gonna try to get that. As you can see, in some cases it'll sound fast, but it won't actually be frame perfect. This is what I meant by it's not trivial. Okay, so there we go. 2.43. That is 0.1 slower than just walking into the room without the wrong warp. So that was so I know that is perfect, and you can use this method to figure out if you are wasting to figure out how many frames you are losing per wrong warp. So yeah, once again, this video is made for those who might have been curious about how I wrong warped or wanted to implement these wrong warps themselves. I hope this video was helpful, and thanks for watching.